A hard-fought, tough battle down in Dallas, Texas tonight, but at the end of the night, the stars shined and the St. Louis Blues fall in the final minute of tonight's game. This is the Blues Central post-game show. He is Thomas Welch. I'm Ethan Hannaford, and the content here on STL Sports Central is presented by DraftKings, where the crown, as always, is yours. Appreciate you being tuned in with us here this evening. We appreciate your patience waiting. We had some technical difficulties, but we are here now. And man, it's a frustrating one. It feels a little bit deja vu-esque. Thomas, what are your thoughts, immediate thoughts coming off of tonight's loss for the Blues against the Stars?
Yeah, it felt like, the deja vu in multiple scenarios. First of all, just another Central Division opponent that gets their leg up on the St. Louis Blues. So that's never great when you're trying to, scratch and claw your way back into the hunt. Away game troubles, obviously, closing out period troubles, much less the third period, and trying to get that coveted, at least get a point in overtime. And Jason Robertson, of course, 30th goal of the season, because of course the Blues have nobody anywhere close to 30 goals on the season, and he's just absolutely cruising away. Scores with a minute left in the game to put them ahead, and it's kind of all she wrote there. But Pavel Buchnevich back at center. There's a lot of reoccurring themes here, as well as the special teams that we've seen from the St. Louis Blues throughout the course of this season. One of which, the bright spot, Dalibor Dvorsky finding the back of the net on the power play to kind of get things off and tie the game back up at one apiece.
This is such a real comment here coming from Aaron D99 saying, the sad thing is I want the first overall pick, but I hate watching this team lose. I think we're all kind of there. Is you look at this team right now, Thomas, you see the back and forth, you see moments where you're encouraged, you're optimistic, especially when you take into consideration kind of what the expectations were going into the season. You looked at this team and you said, okay, based off of what we saw in the latter half of the 2024-25 season, and the expectations were, hey, the window might be starting to open for this team. And they disappoint so often, but then you have moments of seeing encouraging signs. And I think a lot of us are where Aaron is right now, where you probably have an understanding that it's not going to be the year, that what happened in the latter half of last year is not something that is going to happen every year. You cannot put yourself in a position that the Blues did last year and expect for them to go on this miraculous run year in and year out. Unfortunately, it feels on nights like this that the number one pick is much closer than the playoffs, even with, in large part, a pretty well-played game. And I say that considering, yes, there were some sloppy penalties. You could argue some soft penalties were called. They didn't help themselves per se, but they stayed in it against one of the best teams in the NHL, all to come up 60 seconds short.
Yeah, and I think if you're feeling that internal struggle of being, the tug of war of, do I want to pull for this team to tank right now, or do I still see a glimmer of hope that this team can, somehow manifest its way back into the playoffs like they did last season? I feel like this game didn't help you kind of get off the fence on one way or the other, because like you said, Ethan, like Dallas has been, for the most part, a wagon this season, 29, 14, and 9 on the season. They've got, bona fide studs, Jason Robertson to name one of them, but Ruben Hintz as well. And just, kind of guys lighten up the score sheet on a nightly basis. And then the Blues catch them on the back end of a back-to-back in a stretch of games where they've won like 4 of their last like 13. So on one hand, you could be like, this is like a pretty dominant squad as far as like Central Division teams go. They've been, pretty close to the top of the rankings in terms of that for the division. But they've just been hit a brutal run of play here as of recently. So I don't really know whether the Blues got the best version of the Dallas Stars, or how to really assess how the Blues played. Obviously, in a losing result, so it's never positive. But you can't even really get like a true litmus test, because we're not really sure to what degree the Dallas Stars were, firing on all cylinders. So I think that's difficult to assess as well. And then obviously Dylan Holloway coming back to St. Louis, looking for more results on the injury status there. It's just like, Pew Suter still up on the shelf. And it's like, things are just, it feels like everybody's head is on a swivel, don't really know which way to look. And it's like, it's difficult to assess, like, why am I tuning in to see the Blues tonight? It's like, if you have like a preconceived notion about where the result's going to be, or if you're like rooting for the tank, you know, alongside rooting for the tank, it's like rooting for the development of the young players. And, outside of Dalibor Dvorsky kind of lighting it up on the power play, there hasn't been a lot of positives in that regard. So it's just difficult times for Blues fans right now. And I sympathize with everybody in chat, and I sympathize with us, Ethan having to cover it on a game to game basis. But you know what? We're suckers for punishment, and we ride the roller coaster just with you guys, and we'll keep coming back time and time again because it can't get enough of it. It's like addicting.
The part that sucks is hearing all the anger and not really knowing what to give you guys. It just feels like it's, because we do expect better, and we just haven't gotten it from this team, and it really is a shame. But we appreciate you all being here on the Blue Central Postgame Show. Thomas Welch, Ethan Hannaford, and just a reminder that the Blue Central Postgame Show is brought to you by our business banking partners at Home Bank. Let me put the right one up there. There we go. Boy, is she a nice bank. From business lending to everyday banking, Home Bank has been with us since day one as a trusted partner. Listen, business, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the relationships. It's about the trust that you build. And with Home Bank, those relationships make all the difference. Home Bank, they're the team behind our team here at STL Sports Central. What you need to do is go visit, and once post-game show's over, not now, visit myhomebank.bank, or you can call 855-577-2001. Home Bank, member FDIC, more than a bank. They're your business partner. So what I want you guys to be doing in the chat here is I want you to be sharing what your money moment of the game was. We're going to try to feature some of them here as the post game show goes on. What was the moment tonight where I don't know, the game changing moment? You can be simple and you can put the game winner from Jason Robertson with 1 minute remaining, or you could get a little bit more creative, and then maybe there's something else out there where you started getting a bad feeling about the direction in which things were trending tonight. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on what your money moment of the game is, and we'll get Thomas's thoughts on that in a couple minutes. Let's go ahead and let's shift into some talk about the special teams. The Blues penalty kill tonight did not put themselves in a great spot. As I mentioned earlier, you could make a case that maybe some of those were a little bit soft, but the Blues put themselves in a tough spot. And, you have one of the worst penalty kills in the National Hockey League. You're going up against one of the teams with the best power plays in the National Hockey League. And early on, the Stars certainly made the Blues feel it with those couple of power play goals, Thomas.
Yeah, and I think I texted you during the game, like, at what point do we start looking at Mike Weber and the penalty kill, and in terms of, giving him the eye that Jim Montgomery and Doug Armstrong kind of gave to Steve Ott, because I think they said we're ranked like 29th in the league now, which is not great. It feels like the Blues penalty kill has kind of been, really, it's just like the two-way style of play, and being, having that identity in your own zone, as well as like, bringing it in the offense has kind of been a part of that identity for the St. Louis Blues forever now. So, yeah, it's not great to see. And obviously Oscar Sundqvist, and the guys that are out, like, play a big part of, that penalty kill as well. But at the end of the day, like, special teams can be the difference between games. Like, we've seen that time and time again on the losing side for the St. Louis Blues. So as promising as it was to see Dalibor Dvorsky find the back of the net on the power play again tonight, the youth prospect kind of, getting his feet wet in this league and starting to build more confidence, firing shots on goal. The way that it happened, like, Jordan Kyrou makes a pass basically into the skates of Pavel Buchnevich, who's wide open in the slot, right? In between the circles. If he bangs that home on a one-timer, like, he probably has a better chance at scoring than Dalibor Dvorsky did, but it's kind of a fumbled pass. So, like, Pavel Buchnevich has to, like, kick it and then bump it back out to Dvorsky. Dvorsky just hammers it short side, and it tips off the glove and goes into the back of the net. So it's great that they scored, but it's still not a fluid, like, on the other side of the Dallas Stars, who just look like they're forecasting and, like, 3 passes ahead of everyone on the St. Louis Blues trying to kill it off. It's like, there's a very stark contrast between the special teams of the St. Louis Blues right now. And really, it feels like the rest of the league. And I think that's a big, I think that's a big detriment to their game, because especially as we saw and Ethan, we talked about it during the game. It's like Justin Falk is out there and, taking an interference penalty, which you could say whether or not it's soft, but at that point you already have kind of assessed, if the referees or the Zebras are a little bit whistle happy, lay off a little bit. Let's be disciplined. You're a veteran in this league. Let's keep the team in the game. But it looked like he just got his wires crossed, went after the guy when the puck wasn't there, taking an interference penalty. And, even if Dallas doesn't score on that power play, like, that's still momentum and that's still possession. Like, and you're putting stress on your defense and stress on your goalie. So I think it's a collaboration of things. I've voiced before that I'm not the biggest fan of Jim Montgomery just giving it to the officials, even when he disagrees with the calls, just because he's supposed to be that, that voice of reason for the team. Like, hey, like, put it past you, overcome this obstacle, and let's keep it going and put one in the back of the net. And I think it resonates throughout the rest of the team. But there's certainly a disconnect all throughout this team right now, in almost every aspect of their game. And I think everybody's searching for answers to figure it out, and feels like we have and Chat has throughout the course of this whole season.
Let me ask you this. I personally think that in the second period, the Blues, that's where the Blues kind of put themselves, I think I texted you that do we see a one-sided third period because of how much they had played on the penalty kill in that second period. And I'll say this too. I thought they played pretty well on the PK in the second period. I know that Duchesne had the goal, but they didn't really have a lot of opportunities. And I thought Binnington looked pretty good, but you gas yourself out. I didn't think that the third period was necessarily poor play, but who knows? Maybe that limits St. Louis from what they would have been able to do potentially, because they were having to kill off the penalty so much. How much do you think that when you have to play, one man down for that much period of time, does it impact you as the game goes on?
Well, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's about, the cardio, right? And you're chasing pucks in your own zone the whole time and, like, going back and forth and really just eating the shots and trying to, make it as easy as possible on Jordan Binnington. Like, it's going to wear on you. And specifically those players that are on the penalty kill are, ideally your best defensive players. So as you get longer into the course of the game and the dire times and the clutch times when you need them to kind of show up in the third period, like, if they're gassed, I mean, we saw it with Philip Broberg, was out there for an extended shift, kind of gets tangled up in front of the net. He takes an interference penalty too. And it wasn't even like he got his wires crossed. It was just like he was exhausted and kind of hanging on to his guy to, almost stay upright, and ends up dragging him down, and he goes to the box too. So it's just it's a domino effect of everything that goes into the game. But like you said, if you're chasing it in terms of the special teams, by the time you get to the third period, you're just absolutely wiped. And it felt like the Blues certainly looked like that tonight.
He's Thomas Welch. I'm Ethan Hannaford. This is the Blues Central postgame show following a 3-2 loss for St. Louis tonight against the Dallas Stars. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, to STL Sports Central's YouTube if you have not already. All kinds of content coming out all of the time. And listen, it's a big time of year for sports. It is NFL Conference Championship weekend, and DraftKings is the place to be if you have any interest in these two games, or honestly, if you're here, because if you're here, then clearly you care about the Blues as well. But let's specifically focus on the NFL playoffs as we're getting into crunch time here, nearing the Super Bowl. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. It makes every moment feel bigger when when you got a little bit of your own fastened into it. In the postseason, we know that the game shifts fast. We've seen this multiple times this year. But with DraftKings Live betting options, you can stay right in the moment. You can make every single moment matter this NFL postseason with DraftKings. Cannot wait for the NFC Championship. We've seen two great games between the Seahawks and the Rams. There's all kinds of talent on those two rosters. You have Sam Darnold, who's been lights out in these playoffs, but he has the history of struggling. Will he struggle with the lights on? And then you have who's likely going to be the NFL MVP this year, and Matthew Stafford on the other side. Cannot wait to see these two go at it. When you look at star talent, these are the two guys that you can go with. And there are, so there's plenty of options for how you could view this. You got Puka Nacua. You're looking at him for a touchdown total. Perhaps Kyron Williams on the other side, Jackson Smith-Njigba. There's so much talent. It's going to be fun to kind of take a look and see what exactly DraftKings is providing. Plus, DraftKings also has your back with early exit protection. If the player in your eligible NFL prop bet goes down at any point in the first half, you still get paid in cash. With DraftKings, you're covered through the entire first half. So why bet player props anywhere else? New customers, here's your shot. Bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports to turn in $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, where the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus. Physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Additional terms at dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
Thomas Welch, Ethan Hannaford, Blue Central Postgame Show. Thomas, where do you want to take it from here? What do you want to hit on next? What else pissed you off tonight about what you saw from the Blues? Or maybe you want to mix it up. You want to go opposite of the chat, and you want to bring in some positivity to mix things up. Where do you want to go from here?
I always got to follow the chat, and chat's been going crazy. But I will say, off of the ad read, that I did make $20 tonight just betting the money line. So, like I said, if you're gonna be in Missouri or whatever they say on the commercials, and watching the St. Louis Blues team this season, put some anytime goal scorers down. Do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that. Just make it enjoyable for yourself, and that doesn't always mean just watching it down with a bunch of buds or a beer, and watching them march to a result that in some ways you can kind of forecast before you sit down to watch the game. Throw some money down, pull up your DraftKings, get a little frisky with it, and have a good time. It's nice. That's what I've been doing, and it's good to kind of straddle it and have one foot in each way, to be pulling for the St. Louis Blues, but also if they lose, I get financially compensated, every once in a while. So that's kind of nice.
Samuel commenting here asking when exactly is the trade deadline? March 6th. So we are still around a month and a half away. I know there's been some comments in the chat here saying, why is Armstrong not trading some of these guys already? I understand that. We have seen a couple of big trades already this season. You have to imagine that he's getting calls on some of these guys. It's just a matter of getting the right package. So I'm not here to say that Doug Armstrong wouldn't necessarily make a trade right now if he gets the right offer back, but also I'm willing to wait for him to potentially trade some pieces away if it means getting a better package. Most of the time, you're going to likely get a better package the longer that you wait. The more calls you get, the more demand these guys get. And then Samuel also commenting, did the Bills win? Yes, they went belt to butt tonight on St. Bonaventure, so they keep on rolling. There's been a lot of comments tonight about just in general where it went wrong. A lot of people pissed off with Army. A lot of people saying that Monty has completely lost the locker room. Thomas, where did this go wrong for St. Louis? Where can we trace it back to? Like, when did this all fall apart?
I think the biggest thing for me, and we've talked about it consistently on this post-game show throughout this season, but for whatever reason, someone mentioned it in chat earlier too, and I meant to bring it up, but I forgot who said it. I'll try to scroll and find it. But it's just the guys that are making the most money aren't pulling the most weight for the team and whether it's Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas at times, Jordan Kyrou, um, all those perceived goal scorers and those guys that we were like, okay, we've got this guy locked in at this position. Even like Cam Fowler, you're giving him an extension and you're like, okay, he was on the first pairing last year. We've got him locked in on the first pairing again. He's got that veteran presence, can kind of move the puck, distribute it, good skating ability. We see what we saw last season in a small sample size over the course of an entire season. He could be one of our best defensemen. He just kind of falls off a cliff, right? In terms of production so far this season. Justin Falk has kind of stepped up in his absence, but it's like, it's just kind of thrown everything to askew. And when Pavel Buchnevich is making, $8+ million and he has one more goal on the season than Dalibor Dvorsky, everything's just kind of a little bit chaotic in that regard. And you're trying to scramble to find guys like Jonathan Berggren, Nick Bjugstad to step up and start, firing shots off the pipe and in. You sign a guy like Robbie Fabry, you waive Texier. And so it's just, like I said, it's been a domino effect of everything basically going against the St. Louis Blues and what they've been trying to facilitate. And that's why we're seeing the trade rumblings that we're seeing right now, even including Robert Thomas, which I know you guys can kind of understand like the lingo and the trade speak and read between the lines with these insiders and all that stuff. But I certainly don't think the Blues are going to be trading Robert Thomas. And in my opinion, if to even answer the phone or like listen to a conversation about him, I think it would be probably 2 first-round picks, a young prospect, and then a player that's like ready to play in the NHL right now. And even then, like all of those would have to fit into like players that Doug Armstrong wants or a team that Doug Armstrong wants those picks for. So I don't really see a likely scenario where that's going to happen, especially considering the fact that he's injured right now. But there's trade speculation all over the place with, almost every player on the St. Louis Blues, as Doug Armstrong has said, they're open for business. So on the topic of Doug Armstrong and Alexander Steen, I know Doug Armstrong's still going to be in the fold once Steen kind of takes over. So we'll kind of see, what the future looks like with that in terms of decision making. But at the end of the day, like 1000%, this roster and the reason that this team is having shortcomings this season is Doug Armstrong's fault. Like he's the general manager. It's his job to construct the roster. And he like the sword, he falls on the sword when the team has shortcomings, right? That being said, I don't really think this is a scenario where you're like, run him out of town. Like he's always been terrible. Like he's one of the worst GMs in the league. I don't know why people aren't picking up on this. Like he's the GM of Team Canada. So like, there's a lot of information that goes into that process. But it's pretty obvious that he's highly touted among his peers. We know that he's a firm negotiator when it comes to contracts and trade deals and all that stuff. And I think to your point, Ethan, that's why we haven't seen a trade facilitated yet for the St. Louis Blues. And he's even told us in press conferences that he's not going to take, 50 cents on the dollar for a guy that's worth $1.25, which a lot of times, to be fair, GMs in this scenario probably would. So for better or worse, that's our guy in charge right now. And that's how things are manifesting themselves. So I guess his answer to us would be just be patient. And that's the last thing that we as Blues fans want to hear is be patient when we're watching a product on the ice that's just continually declining and going downhill. So yeah, it's frustrating. And I get, chat and everybody, all Blues fans wanting to look for like a scapegoat. But yeah, the comments about Montgomery, dude, it's just in listening to his press conferences after games. And it's like, we've seen the net front presence be a problem for this team, throughout the entire course of this season so far. Why hasn't it changed? And Monty's like, I don't know. I bring it up every practice. Like, what more is he supposed to do? You know what I'm saying? And this core of Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou and all of these guys have already gone through Berube and already gone through Bannister. So if we're getting to the point now to where, Montgomery's got a great resume behind him. He obviously knows puck. He knows how to communicate to guys in the room, especially these young guys. If we're talking about, this core potentially going through another coach, I think it's more effective to look inward at that core at this point than to blame another coach for their shortcomings.
I hate that this is coming up, but when I asked if it what it immediately was, there were some Game 7 comments in there. I I hate that we're even here, because first off, these are professional athletes. If that actually is a reason, then that is absolutely ridiculous. You certainly would never hear them say that, and I would be hard pressed to not believe that that's the case. But I mean, is there a world where that is where this all collapsed? I mean, when you look at when it all turned wrong, that certainly is the point. I mean, from the last game of last year to really every single moment of the 2025-26 season, that has been the case. But I mean, it almost feels like a little bit of a cop out to say that, does it not?
It does, but hand up, I think after we got blown out in the home opener, I said it and people wanted to like run me out of town. But now it's like, it's one of those things where like I didn't want to tell you so, but like I told you so kind of thing. But it does feel like, for whatever it is, like one thing that I've never really felt I had to question about the St. Louis Blues in recent memory until this season was their work ethic, right? And then we get like post-game press conferences from Jim Montgomery where he's black and white saying we're not working hard enough and it's affecting the results of our games. And I know that we're capable of working harder and getting some of these results. And I don't know, like it almost made it seem like he didn't have the answers either to like pull that out of these guys, because no matter what he did, like it wasn't happening. And I did not foresee that coming in a million years, but like it almost makes more sense that this like anomaly of a 1.6 second scenario that, not many teams experience is the only thing that could have that effect on a team like the St. Louis Blues that's rooted in history, rooted in hardworking and that work ethic. And I don't have any other answers for it besides that, because like how else does that happen? How else does that torrential decline just like, something that's been rooted in the history of the St. Louis Blues for so long, just all of a sudden, like it's gone, like a whisper in the wind.
All right, Thomas, it's that time. It's time for the money moment of the game. And it's brought to you by Homebank, the team behind our team at STL Sports Central. Visit myhomebank.bank or call 855-577-2001. Thomas, your money moment of the game. Floor is yours.
Does it have, I don't know. I always try to find an outside of the box way to like make this like either like positive or negative. Sometimes I pick one for like the other team, but it feels like for the Dallas Stars, it's like, oh yeah, money moment of the game was when you scored the game-winning goal with like a minute left. So like that's kind of lame, right?
Hey, Taco Bell this thing up, baby. I want you thinking outside the box, all right?
I think for me, in my viewing experience of the St. Louis Blues, in the way that I watched this game and obviously rooting for them to win, but ultimately being like, it's the Dallas Stars and, it's more likely than not based on the record so far and the way that this Blues team has gone up against Central Division opponents this year, the likelihood of us winning this game, I don't think is high. So that's when it shifts for me to like, okay, how do I assess not just the microcosm of this game, but how do I assess like what this team's going to look like next year or look like, 5 years down the road? And immediately the first thing I always look at is the prospects and the young guys and, Zachary Boldukes when we have them, or Logan Mailloux or guys like that. So for me, I think the biggest positive moment and my money moment of the game that made my heart flutter just a little bit was watching Dalibor Dvorsky hammer a one-timer out of a pass from the slot. I was in a scoring position, passed out of a scoring position, and all of a sudden becomes a scoring position because Dalibor Dvorsky has a hammer at the ripe young age of 20 years old. and has a bright future ahead of him, and hopefully becoming a franchise stalwart for the St. Louis Blues and showing his dominance on the power play against a team like the Dallas Stars, even if they were, kerfuddling just a little bit. I think that was the biggest positive for me. So I'm going with Dalibor Dvorsky's goal as my money moment of the game.
I think this one's kind of interesting. Jeremy's commenting saying that Parayko icing the puck was his money
Change the
moment
tides
of the
for
game.
sure.
D Brown's dogging on Parayko too, standing there watching Robertson fight through checks with a puck to attempt to poke check him instead of skating forward and putting the body on him and tying up his stick. Yeah, chat's not happy with Colton Parayko tonight. Understandably,
I think it's a fair criticism. Yeah, but it also felt like on that Jason Robertson goal, there was like 3 Blues players around him, and all of them gave about 50% of the effort that Jason Robertson did. And that's why Jason Robertson ended up with the puck, fired it on net, and then went in the back of the net. So, it just circles back to the work ethic thing. Like, how do you get these guys to just grind harder? How do you get these guys to, even in the last minute of the game, not being like, oh, it's going to overtime. Like, we got our point. Let's just, skate this out and get the whistle, even, face off in our own zone, but we'll be fine. Jordan Binnington's one of the best goalies in the league. And then, snap, turn around, the horn goes, and you're like, oh, wait, now we're losing.
Real. Blue Central Postgame Show, presented by Drink Thunder. It's how you fuel your fire. It's the all-natural pre-workout that just hits different. Plant-based, fruit-powered, zero sugar, sweetened naturally with monk fruit. Each serving is packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants to ignite your energy and push your performance to the next level. 3 flavors. You choose yours: orange mango, blackberry lemonade, strawberry cream, and then feel the rush the natural way. Order now. DrinkThunder.com. Drink Thunder, pure power, no crash, all natural. Baby. Thomas, as we wrap, final thoughts here on the performance tonight and what St. Louis needs to do to try and start riding this ship tomorrow night at the Enterprise Center, a 7:00 puck drop against the Los Angeles Kings.
Well, it's going to be tough to completely turn this team around overnight. So I think the biggest thing for me in a focal point, just because of recent events with Steve Ott, Jim Montgomery taking over the special teams, and then, kind of the microscope that we put on the penalty kill tonight. I think let's just make that a focal point for next game. It's not just, the execution of the power play and the penalty kill, but just staying out of the box, staying disciplined, not having instances where your wires get crossed and you take a dumb penalty, or, even just avoiding scenarios where you're on the ice gassed for 2 minutes and you have to hook a guy because he's about to get like a breakaway. I think you can technically chalk those up as mistakes. I don't think it's necessarily always like an individual making that mistake. Sometimes it's more so like a team is unable to make a shift or, miscommunications and stuff like that. But I think when you minimize those mistakes, you give yourself the best chance at walking away with a victory. And I think tonight against the Dallas Stars, the Blues just had too many of those mistakes across the board, and that's why they ended up with the result that we saw. So minimize those mistakes against the Los Angeles Kings, like you said. And, I'm not going to guarantee a win, but I think we'll end up with a better result and a better performance, which is a step in the right direction for the process, which is really, as much as we hate to say it, like, I think that's all that we can really hope for right now when we go in to watch these Blues games, is assess where they're at in the process. Hopefully they make some, progress in that regard and build on it for the next game.
Chat, thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate you a lot. If you're here, if you're commenting, sharing your thoughts, or just watching, please like and subscribe to STL Sports Central. There is content here all of the time. It's not just Blues, it's Cardinals, it's SLU basketball. SLU basketball, 19-1 after tonight. Watch out, March is coming, fellas. March is coming. But yeah, we cover all of the St. Louis sports here. Stay safe this weekend, everyone. Please be careful in this crazy weather. Yeah, I appreciate you guys all repping your teams in here. But yeah, take care of yourselves and like and subscribe, dear Lord, if you haven't already. And we'll be back here tomorrow night following the conclusion of the Blues and the Los Angeles Kings. He's Thomas Welch. I'm Ethan Hannaford. This has been Blue Central Postgame on STL Sports Central, presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. Peace!